Marcus Thompson had been a Royal Protection Officer for 12 years, when everything changed on a rainy Tuesday morning in October. At 42, he was a man who took pride in his invisible presence, his ability to blend into the background, while keeping watchful eyes on the royal family. His uniform was always pressed, his shoes polished to mirror shine, and his expression carefully neutral. The job had consumed his life in ways he never expected. He had missed his daughter's school plays, his son's football matches, and countless family dinners. His wife Sarah had grown tired of eating alone and eventually stopped setting a place for him at the table. Their conversations had become brief exchanges about schedules and bills. Nothing more, but Marcus told himself it was worth it. He was protecting the future of Britain, serving something greater than himself. That morning, Marcus was stationed in the east wing of Windsor Castle, watching over the family quarters during the children's breakfast time. Prince George, now 10 years old, had developed a routine that Marcus had observed hundreds of times. The young prince would finish his porridge, kiss his parents goodbye, and walk to his private tutor's study for morning lessons. But today was different. As Prince George walked down the familiar corridor, he stopped suddenly. Marcus tensed, immediately scanning for threats, his hand moving instinctively toward his radio. Then he saw what had caught the prince's attention. An elderly cleaning lady named Mrs. Henderson was struggling with a heavy cart of supplies. She was in her 70s, had worked at the castle for over 30 years, and everyone knew her as the woman who hummed old wartime songs while she worked. She was trying to lift a large container of cleaning solution, but her arthritis was clearly causing her pain. Her face was twisted in discomfort as she attempted the task again and again. Marcus expected Prince George to simply walk past. After all, there were staff members whose job it was to help with such matters. The royal children were taught to be polite but maintain appropriate distance from the working staff. This was protocol, and protocol was everything in the royal household. Instead, Prince George set down his school bag and approached Mrs. Henderson. "Good morning, Mrs. H," he said with a warm smile that reminded Marcus of his late grandmother, Queen Elizabeth. "That looks rather heavy. May I help you?" Mrs. Henderson looked surprised and pleased. "Oh, Your Royal Highness, you shouldn't trouble yourself. I can manage." But Prince George had already moved to help her. Together, they lifted the container onto the cart. The boy's small hands gripped one side while the elderly woman managed the other. As they worked, Prince George asked about her grandchildren, remembering details from previous conversations that Marcus realized he had been listening to all along. "How is little Emma doing with her reading?" Prince George asked, as they arranged the supplies properly on the cart. Mrs. Henderson's face lit up. "Much better, Your Highness. She's reading whole books now, thanks to that advice you gave her about sounding out the big words." Marcus watched in growing amazement. Here was a 10-year-old boy, heir to the throne, who not only remembered the name of a cleaning lady's granddaughter, but had previously given her reading advice. When had that conversation happened? How many such conversations had there been that Marcus had somehow missed, despite being present? After helping with the cart, Prince George noticed that Mrs. Henderson was limping slightly as she began to push it down the hall. Without hesitation, he positioned himself at the back of the cart and helped her push it to the supply closet at the end of the corridor. "Your Royal Highness," Mrs. Henderson said with tears forming in her eyes, "you have such a kind heart. Your great-grandmother would be so proud of the young man you're becoming." Prince George smiled genuinely. "She always told me that being royal means being of service to others. I think she would say that helping you is just part of my job, don't you think?" Marcus felt something shift inside his chest. In 12 years of protection duty, he had seen countless formal ceremonies, state dinners, and official engagements. He had witnessed the pageantry and protocol that surrounded royal life, but this simple, unwitnessed act of kindness from a 10-year-old boy struck him more powerfully than any grand gesture he had ever observed. As Prince George picked up his school bag and continued toward his tutor's study, he caught sight of Marcus watching from his position near the window. Instead of being embarrassed or self-conscious about being observed, the young prince simply nodded politely and continued on his way. Marcus remained at his post, but his mind was spinning. He thought about his own children, Emma and James, now 15 and 13. When was the last time he had seen them perform such a simple act of kindness? When was the last time he had performed one himself? His job had trained him to see threats everywhere, to maintain emotional distance, to prioritize duty above human connection. The rest of his shift passed in a blur of routine checks and standard procedures, but Marcus found himself replaying the scene over and over. That evening, as he sat in his car in the castle parking lot before heading home, he called his wife. "Sarah, it's me," he said when she answered. "Marcus, is everything all right? You never call during the week." "I know. I wanted to ask about Emma and James. How was their day?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "They're fine, Marcus. Emma got her math test back. She scored 92%. James made the school football team." Marcus felt a stab of guilt. "That's wonderful. I should have been there to celebrate with them." "Yes," Sarah said quietly. "You should have been. But you never are." As Marcus drove home that night through the dark countryside, he couldn't stop thinking about Prince George's words. Being royal means being of service to others. What service was Marcus really providing? He protected the royal family with his life, but who was protecting his own family? Who was being kind to his children when they needed help? Who was asking about their reading progress, or celebrating their achievements? That night, Marcus lay awake, staring at the ceiling while Sarah slept beside him. For the first time in years, he began to question whether the life he had built around duty and service was actually serving anyone at all. The following weeks passed like a strange dream for Marcus. He continued his duties with the same professional efficiency he had maintained for 12 years, but internally everything had changed. He found himself watching the royal children differently, noticing things he had somehow missed before despite being trained to observe everything. He saw Prince George quietly helping his younger sister Charlotte when she struggled with her shoes before a public appearance. He witnessed the boy sharing his favorite sweets with palace staff during tea time, always making sure the newest employees felt included. Most remarkably, Marcus observed how naturally these acts came to the young prince. There was no performance in it, no awareness that he was being watched and judged. It was simply who he was. Marcus began to contrast this with his own behavior at home. When he managed to arrive before his children's bedtime, he would sit stiffly at the dinner table, checking his phone for work messages and offering brief responses to their stories about school. He realized he had become a stranger in his own home, a figure who appeared occasionally to remind everyone about rules and responsibilities before disappearing again into his demanding career. One evening, during a rare family dinner where Marcus had arrived home early due to a schedule change, his daughter Emma mentioned struggling with a history project about World War II. She needed to interview someone who lived through that era for her assignment. "What about Mrs. Patterson next door?" Sarah suggested. "She's in her 80s. I'm sure she'd have stories to share." Marcus looked up from his plate. "You could ask Mrs. Henderson at work," he said without thinking. "She's worked at Windsor for 30 years, and her parents lived through the war. She knows all the stories." His family stared at him in surprise. Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Since when do you know personal details about the cleaning staff, Marcus?" The question hung in the air, and Marcus realized he couldn't explain how he had come to learn so much about Mrs. Henderson without revealing what he had witnessed. I've been paying more attention lately." "Paying attention to what?" James asked, genuinely curious. It was perhaps the longest conversation Marcus had had with his son in months. Marcus struggled to find the words. "To people. To what matters to them." That weekend, instead of going into the office to catch up on paperwork as he usually did, Marcus drove Emma to the castle to meet Mrs. Henderson. The elderly woman was delighted to help with the school project, and spent 2 hours sharing vivid stories about rationing, air raid shelters, and community spirit during the darkest days of the war. As they talked, Marcus watched his daughter's face light up with interest and engagement. Emma asked thoughtful questions and took careful notes. She thanked Mrs. Henderson warmly and promised to send her a copy of the finished project. Driving home, Emma was unusually chatty. "Dad, Mrs. Henderson is amazing. Did you know she met her husband in a bomb shelter?" And she used to make Christmas decorations out of tin foil because there was nothing else available? Marcus smiled, feeling a warmth he hadn't experienced in years. She's a remarkable woman. I'm glad you got to meet her. How do you know her so well? I mean, you really know her. Not just her name. Marcus considered his answer carefully. I suppose I've started to realize that knowing the people around us, really knowing them, is more important than I used to think. Emma nodded thoughtfully. Maybe you could try knowing us better too, Dad. James and me, I mean. The simple statement hit Marcus like a physical blow. His 15-year-old daughter had just told him, with no malice or anger, that her own father didn't really know her. The worst part was that she was absolutely right. That night, Marcus found himself looking through photo albums that Sarah kept in the living room. Page after page showed birthdays, school events, family vacations, and Christmas mornings. In almost every photo, Sarah stood with the children while Marcus was absent. When he did appear in pictures, he looked distracted, often checking his watch or glancing toward his phone. He stopped at a photo from James's 8th birthday party. His son was blowing out candles on a football-themed cake, surrounded by friends from school. Sarah was laughing at something one of the children had said. Marcus was in the background, talking on his phone, completely removed from the moment. How many moments like this had he missed? How many times had his children needed help, encouragement, or simply his presence, while he was focused on protecting someone else's family? The next Monday, Marcus returned to work with a heavy heart. During his lunch break, he found himself walking through the corridors where he had witnessed Prince George's act of kindness. Mrs. Henderson was there again, organizing supplies in the same supply closet. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Henderson," Marcus said, approaching her with unusual directness. She looked up, surprised to be addressed by one of the Royal Protection officers. "Good afternoon, sir. How can I help you? I wanted to thank you for spending time with my daughter Emma last weekend. The interview for her school project meant a great deal to her." Mara, Mrs. Henderson's face broke into a warm smile. "Oh, you're Emma's father. What a lovely girl she is. So polite and interested in everything. You should be very proud." Marcus felt a mix of pride and shame. She is wonderful. Though I'm afraid I can't take much credit for how she turned out. My work keeps me away from home far too often. Mrs. Henderson studied his face with the wisdom of someone who had raised 5 children of her own. "It's never too late to start being present, Mr. Thompson. Children remember the moments when their parents truly see them, even if those moments come later than we might wish." Her words stayed with Marcus throughout the rest of his shift. That evening, he made a decision that would have seemed impossible just weeks earlier. He turned off his work phone when he arrived home and left it in his car. At dinner, he asked James about football practice and actually listened to the entire answer. He helped Emma with her mathematics homework. Discovering that she was far more advanced than he had realized, he sat with Sarah on the couch afterward and asked about her own day, her own dreams, her own frustrations. "What's gotten into you lately, Marcus?" Sarah asked, though her tone was more curious than critical. "You seem different." Marcus thought about Prince George, about the simple act of helping an elderly woman with her cart, about the natural kindness that seemed to flow from the young prince without effort or calculation. "I've been thinking about what it means to serve," Marcus said finally. "I've spent 12 years serving the royal family, and I've been good at my job, but I've forgotten how to serve my own family. I've forgotten how to serve the people who matter most." Sarah reached for his hand, and Marcus realized it had been months since they had touched with any real tenderness. "I don't want to be a stranger in my own home anymore," Marcus continued. "I don't want my children to grow up feeling like they have to make an appointment to spend time with their father." That night, as Marcus lay in bed, he thought about the conversation he would need to have with his supervisors, the conversation that would change everything. 3 weeks after his conversation with Sarah, Marcus requested a meeting with Chief Inspector Williams, head of Royal Protection Services. He had rehearsed what he would say dozens of times, but sitting in the oak-paneled office overlooking the castle grounds, the words felt inadequate. Chief Inspector Williams was a man who had devoted his entire career to royal service. His desk was covered with commendations, photographs with various members of the royal family, and awards for excellence in security operations. He looked at Marcus with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Thompson, you've been one of our most reliable officers for over a decade," Williams began. "Your record is exemplary. Your dedication has been noted at the highest levels. What did you want to discuss?" Marcus took a deep breath. "Sir, I'm submitting my resignation from Royal Protection Services, effective in 4 weeks' time." The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. Williams set down his pen and studied Marcus's face intently. "This is completely unexpected, Thompson. Are you experiencing personal difficulties? Financial pressures? We have counseling services available, and we can certainly discuss adjustments to your schedule or assignment." Number 4. "No, sir, nothing like that," Marcus replied. "This decision comes from a place of clarity, not crisis. I've realized that I've been so focused on serving the crown that I've failed to serve my own family. My children are growing up without really knowing their father." Williams leaned back in his chair. "Marcus, may I speak frankly? You're 42 years old. You have 8 years until full pension eligibility. You're in line for promotion to senior protection officer within the next 2 years. You'd be walking away from financial security, prestige, and a career that most people would consider the pinnacle of public service." Marcus nodded. "I understand all of that, sir. But I've come to realize that true service isn't just about protecting important people from external threats. Sometimes it's about being present for the small moments that actually matter." William studied him carefully. "What brought about this change in perspective? This doesn't sound like the Marcus Thompson I've known for 12 years. Marcus hesitated. He couldn't explain the full truth about what he had witnessed without potentially compromising the privacy of the royal family. "I've been observing the way the royal family interacts with staff, particularly the children. Their genuine care for the people around them, regardless of position or title. It's made me reflect on my own relationships and priorities." "The royal children are indeed well raised," Williams acknowledged. "But surely that's all the more reason to continue in service here? With respect, sir, I think the best way I can honor what I've learned from them is to apply those lessons to my own life. To be the kind of father and husband who is truly present, not just physically in the house but emotionally available." Williams was quiet for several minutes, reviewing Marcus's personnel file. Finally, he looked up. "If this is truly your final decision, we'll begin the transition process immediately. Your replacement will need thorough briefing on all security protocols and personnel relationships. I assume you're willing to assist with that training?" "Of course, sir. I would never leave without ensuring a smooth transition." The conversation continued for another hour, covering practical details about departure procedures, security clearances, and pension arrangements. When Marcus finally left the office, he felt simultaneously liberated and terrified. That evening, he sat down with Sarah and the children for what he had privately decided would be the most important family meeting of their lives. "I have something significant to tell you all," Marcus began. "I've decided to resign from my position at Windsor Castle." Emma nearly dropped her glass of water. "What? Dad? Why? I thought you loved your job." "I did love aspects of it," Marcus replied honestly, "but I've realized that I love you 3 more. And I haven't been showing that love through my actions." James, now 13 and typically skeptical of adult pronouncements, crossed his arms. "So what are you going to do instead? Mum's job doesn't pay enough to support all of us." Marcus smiled at his son's practical concern. "I've been offered a position with a private security firm. The pay is actually better, and most importantly, it's Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. No more weekends at the castle. No more missing your football matches or school events." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Marcus, are you sure? This job has been your entire identity for so long." "That's exactly the problem," Marcus replied. "My job became my identity, and I lost sight of who I am as a husband and father. I want to build a new identity around being present for the people I love." Over the following weeks, Marcus trained his replacement, a young officer named David Chen, who reminded Marcus of himself 12 years earlier. Eager, dedicated, and completely focused on the mission. During their final training session, Marcus found himself offering advice he wished someone had given him years earlier. "The job will consume as much of your life as you allow it to," Marcus told David as they walked through the castle grounds. "Set boundaries early, even if they seem artificial. Your family will need you in ways that work never will." David nodded politely, but Marcus could see the same look in his eyes that Marcus had once carried, the belief that the job was too important to approach with anything less than total commitment. On his last day, Marcus was surprised when Prince George approached him during a corridor patrol. The young prince, now 11, extended his hand formally. "Mr. Thompson, I heard you're leaving us. I wanted to thank you for your service." Marcus shook the boy's hand, marveling at the composure and genuine warmth of someone so young. "It has been an honor, serving your family." "Your Royal Highness," Prince George smiled. "Mum told me you're leaving to spend more time with your own family. I think that's wonderful. Family time is precious, isn't it?" "Yes, Your Royal Highness, it truly is." As Prince George walked away, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. A simple act of kindness from this remarkable young person had sparked a transformation that Marcus never could have imagined. 6 months later, Marcus stood on the sideline of a muddy football pitch, cheering enthusiastically as James scored the winning goal for his school team. Sarah stood beside him, her hand in his, both of them beaming with pride. After the match, they drove to Emma's school to attend her presentation about World War II history, the same project that Mrs. Henderson had helped her complete. Emma's presentation was brilliant, filled with personal anecdotes and historical insights that captivated her entire class. During the question and answer period, one student asked where she had found such interesting first-hand accounts. "My dad introduced me to someone who lived through that time," Emma replied, looking directly at Marcus with genuine affection. "He's really good at knowing people, not just knowing about them." Marcus felt his chest swell with emotion. He thought about Prince George, probably sitting in a classroom somewhere in Windsor, learning about history from textbooks, while somehow already understanding that real history is made through individual acts of kindness and connection. That evening, as the family sat around the dinner table sharing stories from their respective days, Marcus's phone rang. The caller ID showed his former supervisor at Windsor Castle. Marcus looked at the phone, then at his family, and made a decision that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. He turned off the phone without answering and placed it in the kitchen drawer. "Sorry about that," he said, returning to the table. "Now, Emma, you were telling us about your chemistry experiment?" As his daughter launched into an animated explanation of molecular structures, Marcus realized that he had finally learned what Prince George had tried to teach him through his quiet example. That true nobility comes not from the positions we hold or the titles we carry, but from the love we show to the people right in front of us. The guard, who had spent 12 years protecting a royal family, had finally learned how to protect what mattered most: the precious, ordinary moments that make up a life well lived.